Hello and welcome to today's Global Sign webcast. Today we'll be covering the topic of optimizing document workflows and meeting compliance with scalable, trusted digital signatures. I'm Dan Farrell with the Global Sign marketing team, and I wanted to thank you for joining us today. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our presenter for today, Sid Desai. Sid is the Director of Sales Engineering and is responsible for leading a team of engineers that help our customers implement advanced managed PKI solutions. So now I'll hand it over to Sid.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan, for that introduction. And thank you all for joining today. So what you'll learn today in this webinar are the benefits and roadblocks to going paperless. We'll then cover any compliance and technology issues that a lot of companies face these days. And then we'll go into the deployment technologies and options that most of you have available today. All right. So before we get started, I wanted to take a step back and talk to you about how we got here. I would imagine that many of you have experienced the shift to the paperless office. This isn't anything new. We've been talking about it for many years now, getting rid of paper. Now, the benefits are plenty. Obviously, you save on costs, literally the paper itself, but then everything else associated with it. The costs of storage and organization supplies, things like printers, toner, ink, cartridges, scanners, mailing and shipping costs. These costs can really add up with any kind of paper-based workflows, and I'm sure most of you deal with that on a daily basis. It also saves time and resources. So relying on paper adds a lot of extra steps to workflows, such as printing, mailing, scanning, filing, and maintaining. And all of these take manpower and time away from, quite frankly, the more important things that people should really be focusing on. So removing these steps or extra steps can significantly speed up the processes and document delivery times. So we all know that a paperless office is a faster, more efficient office. The other thing that going paperless can help you with is it saves the environment. Now, I don't know if a lot of you are green, but going green continues to be a major motivator helped by some government programs that incentivize companies to go paperless. And I think the last benefit for going paperless is mobility. So if you do have employees in different offices or locations, or partners or consumers that you work with that you don't want to inconvenience, that person doesn't have to be there in person to sign, or don't have to deal with faxing or mailing a hard copy, and then waiting for them to get it signed and get it back to you. So people don't want to deal with paper, and I think many workflows and processes have been brought online as a result. But there's one area of document processing that continues to be a sticking point. For me, and I'm sure this is the case for most of you, signatures are often the biggest roadblock to a completely paperless office. Now you may be thinking, don't we already have an answer for this? There are a ton of signature solutions out there. There's a ton of electronic signature options out there. Well, you're not wrong about that, but it's not quite that simple. I see a few major areas of confusion as barriers to electronic signature adoption. People want an electronic signing solution, but they're confused. There's the technology itself, as mentioned. There are a range of solutions out there, and it can be very difficult to weed through them and figure out which one you actually need. Then there's the compliance and legality options. Obviously, it's not enough to replace your wet ink signatures with electronic versions. You need to make sure whatever you're using in their place is a legally accepted alternative. Then finally, once you've figured out which type of signature you need, how do you actually deploy it? So let's break these down, yes? First of all, electronic signature is kind of an umbrella term, encompassing a wide variety of signing actions and assurance levels, ranging from simply checking a box, entering your initials, typing up your name, or maybe inserting an image of your own handwritten signature, to using a cryptographic-based digital signature. The lack of standardization can be very confusing when it comes time to investigate potential solutions. How do you know which one you really need? Is inserting a handwritten signature okay on a mortgage application, or is that not the best standard for it? Well, depending on your use case, it might be enough for you to just collect someone's initials. But if you need higher assurance levels, or if you need to have certain regulations in place, you need to be a little bit more picky. So start thinking about what is it that you want. There's a plethora of solutions and technologies out there today, but when you start thinking about what you or your needs are, things start getting a little bit more easier. This brings me to another common confusion point. What's the difference between electronic and digital signature? Though often used interchangeably, these two terms are definitely not the same. Digital signatures are a type of an electronic signature based on crypto technology. So what does that underlying technology actually mean for you? How does it translate to your business? Well, the first option is the authentication of the signer. So digital signatures are more than just regular electronic signatures. Third-party verified identity is used to apply the signature. You can actually interact with the signature and see more details about the signer's identity. It's not just an image that gives you no further information. It's a lot more than that. The second benefit is non-repudiation. So the signature is applied with the user's private key, which is then tied to their verified identity and computationally infeasible to guess. So unless the key has actually been compromised, the signer cannot deny that they signed the document, unless somebody has access to the user's private key. Well, in that case, then the person just got the keys to the kingdom. The third benefit is document integrity. So digital signature creates a tampered evidence seal on the document content. Basically, when you open a signed document, part of the signature verification process that goes on behind the scenes involves checking the integrity of the content and then comparing it to the moment when the signature was applied. If they don't match and the comparison fails, you see an alert telling you not to trust the content. This capability is one of the major drivers in adoption, for example, for engineers, protecting IP, ensuring contracts and invoices aren't altered. Timestamping is also another benefit. Third-party timestamps can be incorporated into signatures rather than relying on system clock, which can be manipulated. The way you know for certain that the signature was applied when it actually was. It also supports audits and time-sensitive document trails. So you can now see how this extra functionality can offer higher assurance levels of trust in these types of signatures compared to regular electronic signatures. So let's take a quick look at a sample digitally signed document, which in this case, it is a PDF opened in Adobe Reader. And let's see some of these elements in action. So the first thing that pops out right in the front is there is a valid signature. So in this case, the signature, the document was signed by a person named Callie Cook. It also gives you the actual signing time of the signature and the source of trust, which in this case is obtained from the Adobe Approved Trusted List, or AATL. The second pointer is it says the document has not been modified, so there is non-repudiation in place. And it also says that the signature has a valid timestamp, in this case, the timestamp being pulled from a timestamp server that's not local to a machine. And all of this is kind of incorporated into a valid status message at the top of the document that basically says that all signed and all signatures are valid. So now that I hope I've cleared some of the technology confusion, let's move on to a much more thrilling topic, compliance. Compliance and electronic signatures are an interesting pair, and in my mind, I think most people tend to cringe a little bit at the word compliance. It is restrictive, to say the least. I might not be able to do exactly what I want to do because I need to meet these strict requirements, that kind of thing. However, in case of electronic signatures, I think the emergence of more regulations has actually been a good thing. And can potentially help increase adoption by introducing standardization or perhaps making it easier on you to figure out what you need. The flip side of this is you can also motivate organizations that have held off from moving to electronic signatures and are still dealing with paper to actually make the move because they're forced to. So e-signature legislation has been around for a while, but was fairly vague for a long time. For example, the eSign Act in the US was passed in the year 2000, but just says that an electronic signature or record cannot be denied legal effect just because it's electronic. Fortunately, some industry regulations have gone more specific. In this case, there's the FDA CFR 21 Part 11, or the EMA e-signature capabilities that are more focused in the European region. There's been some major uptake in adoption from the professional engineering boards that are state-dependent as well. We're also now at a point in our lives where there are a lot more established standards than ever before. EIDAS is one such major development. So if you're not familiar, EIDAS is a European regulation whose goal is to create a common foundation for electronic signatures. So it just doesn't cover signatures, but they are a key component. What makes it such a game changer is that it establishes legally binding electronic signature standards for all European member states. This means companies can adopt one solution and know it will be accepted across all these countries and economies. It's also different because it incorporates the concept of assurance levels, acknowledging that not all signatures are created equal and different use cases might require different signature strengths. It dictates different criteria for each level and becoming more stringent for higher assurance signatures. Now, here's the interesting part. Now, while this is a European regulation, we're seeing a lot more adoption outside of EU as well. For example, Norway. Anybody who wants to do business with those states would need to meet it as well. So I guess compliance emergence is great, and that EIDAS is actually establishing international standards is very encouraging. But they still don't go into the specifics about which technologies or vendors you should use. So you know what your signatures need, but not necessarily which type meets those criteria and where to go to get them. Fortunately, there are some commonalities. If you start to read through the regulations I mentioned, like the CFR 21, the Professional Engineering Boards, and the EIDAS, which I generally do when I need a good nap, you might see some of the same language. Signatures must be unique to the signer, capable of identifying the signer, and under the sole possession of the signer. It should also be linked to the data so that any change to the data is detectable. And some regulations also mention timestamping. For example, CFR 21 does. Now you may be wondering, okay, so how does that help me? Well, if you think back to that extra functionality that we just discussed with digital signatures earlier, you can see that they map quite nicely to many of these requirements. Okay, so regulations are starting to narrow the scope and focus in on high assurance signatures, and many of the requirements can be met by digital signatures. But how do you actually start using them? Well, you basically need two things to get started. You need a signing credential, and this is the digital certificate issued from a certificate authority that contains your verified identity. And you need a document application or a software. Programs like Acrobat or Office, workflows like Assertia, Lifecycle, or Custom Solutions. There's a lot of factors that go into choosing an application or a workflow, so I'm going to focus more on the credential side of things here. So why is the public trust so important? I think we've had a lot of people and companies say that we need that public trust. So why is it that important? Well, let's take a look at a document that was signed with an untrusted signature. The recipient gets a very scary warning right at the top of the document saying that the signature has problems and the actual validity is unknown. You can't really trust that signature, whereas a publicly trusted signature clearly shows that it's valid. To have that signature verification, you need to use publicly trusted signatures or credentials to apply the signature. So public trust comes down to the roots of the CA you get your certificates from. There are two major root stores for documents: the Adobe Authorized Trust List, or AATL, which is a successor of the Certified Document Services, or CDS, program also run by Adobe, and the Microsoft Root Trust List. The CA's roots need to be in these programs in order for signatures applied with their certificates to be automatically trusted and not show any warnings. Another thing to consider is whether the signature will automatically include a trusted timestamp. And as mentioned earlier, some regulations require a trusted third-party timestamp for signatures. All right, so moving on to actual deployment options, and by this I mean how are you storing and managing the signing credential. For starters, AATL, Adobe's trust program that I just mentioned, requires that the certificates be stored onto a FIPS-compliant hardware such as a token, smart card, or HSM. Which option is right for you is really going to depend on your situation. So let's break them down. So let's talk about token-based or smart card-based deployments. Token-based or smart card-based deployments are very common for companies that need individual employees to apply signatures, which is very common for people who need to comply with the CFR 21 or the AEC industry. They use token-based or smart card-based credentials all the time. Now, you can also put a department-level credential, such as accounting or marketing, on a token if that's what you need. So how are these token-based signing credentials used? Let's take an example from one of our engineering customers, Clow Harbor Associates. Previously, the firm was manually signing thousands of documents, which was not exactly a good use of the engineer's time. Finalized documents were printed and physically signed and then sent to a separate center to be scanned as a PDF and then printed again for the distribution to various parties. What a waste of time and money. With digital signatures, the engineers can just sign the document digitally right from their computer, no need to print it, and they can just send it over to whoever needs it. No need to involve the distribution center for the extra printing and mailing. And this is somewhat a simple example of a workflow in that only the engineer is doing the signing. It is important to note that you can apply multiple signatures to a document too, if needed. And if you do need to share your document with others, you can control what types of changes they can make, just so you don't have to worry about somebody changing the contract after you send it to them. And you can also customize how your signatures look, like adding an image, as Clow Harbor Associates did with their engineering seals. All right, so the other option for companies to do deployments are server or HSM-based deployments. HSM stands for Hardware Security Modules, and these are very ideal for organizations using automated PDF generation software to create and manage large volumes of documents. A lot of the HSMs are compatible with signing solutions like Adobe Lifecycle or Certia DSS, and a lot of companies, in fact, use the free libraries provided by iText to develop their own signing solutions. Typically, in the case of HSMs, the signing certificate is usually issued to a department or an organization at that level of identity and is installed on the HSMs. The HSMs provide a faster setup, lower cost of total ownership, and you don't need an in-house crypto expertise. And a lot of times these HSMs can be hosted remotely by a third-party company such as GlobalSign, so that you don't have to manage all these resources in-house. So let's take a look at this type of deployment in action. As an example, Columbia Mutual is a life insurance company when they realized that they could significantly reduce their policy turnaround time if they switched to an electronic document workflow. In order to do that, they needed a signing solution that would timestamp the documents and provide the same legal integrity as a physical signature while also being easy for sales agents to use. So they created a custom iText web application that would take the electronic applications and apply an organization-level signature which certifies the information in the policy and protects it against future changes. Now, sales agents can submit applications from anywhere, and the turnaround time to issue the policies have been significantly reduced. The solution is also easy for agents to use. They just upload the document and click a button, and they get their commissions payments much sooner, so pretty much a win-win for everyone. The other option is you can integrate with workflow providers such as Certia. In this case, there's no hardware for you to manage because the entire workflow happens on the Certia solution. This is an end-to-end solution, so there's no need for you to install anything else. And it also supports multiple levels of identities. So in this case, if you want to have the entire organization use a single identity, or if you want individuals to use their own individual identities, you can do that as well. GlobalSign, as a PKI provider, we're currently expanding our partnerships in this space, and so we are talking to other vendors in this space as well. All right, so I guess the bottom line here is that signatures don't have to be roadblocks. Now, there are newer regulations out there that are getting more specific and require higher assurance. There are solutions that the marketplace is offering for digital signatures that are becoming more scalable and easy to use. And by partnering with a public CA such as GlobalSign, we can offer the most important components for your initiatives, including AATL trusted signatures and certificates with timestamping and also options for you to have a single certificate that can not just sign PDFs but also Office documents and any special documents such as those generated by Bluebeam. Well, with that, I'll turn it back to Dan for any questions.
All right, thanks, Sid. So yeah, we have some frequently asked questions about digital signatures. The first being, can you apply multiple signatures to one document?
So yes, yeah, Dan, you can definitely add multiple signatures to a single document. As long as you have a workflow processing software such as Adobe, you can have multiple people use their own individual identities and perform signatures or sign the document with their own signatures on that single document. So the answer is yes, you can have multiple signatures in one document.
All right. A second frequently asked question is, what happens to the signature if the signing certificate expires or is revoked?
Well, in this case, if your signing certificate is expired or revoked, at the time of signing the document, it was still valid. So in that case, the signature, which was applied to the document at the time of signing with the correct timestamp, is still valid, which makes the document kind of valid as well. But in case the cert is expired, and if you're trying to apply a signature, you can't do that just because the cert itself is expired in this case.
Okay, and the final question is, what's the difference between AATL and CDS?
So CDS is really an older program that Adobe released back in 2005. The Certified Document Services, or CDS program, automatically trusts new digital IDs that are chained to the Adobe root certificate. Now the AATL program, it's an advanced version of the CDS program. It offers the same high-level benefits as CDS offers, with the added benefit that the chain to the Adobe root certificate is now not required. We do have a blog post on our website that talks about this in detail as well, if you want to check that out.
All right, and that's going to do it for this webcast. I want to thank you all for joining us again, and have a great day.
All right, thanks, Dan. Thank you, everybody.